And let's talk about Jahn and Najafi. It came out a couple of days ago that he could be leading a consortium to try and take over Spurs. I'll just get the things up. Iranian-American billionaire Jahn Najafi, chair of MSP Sports Capital, is set to launch a $3.75 billion takeover bid for Tottenham Hotspur. Tottenham declined to comment at the time. And then Sky Sports did say that Tottenham are not for sale and the owners are committed to their long-term plan amid the interest. I mean, we'll start with you here, Sean. I mean, who is Jahn Najafi, and do we want him and his consortium at Spurs?
Well, look, he's somebody that has extensive history of buying. I think he's acquired 30 different businesses that are moving more and more towards sports and media. But he's also got that history in technology, and he's into real estate. He's part of a private equity group. MSP Sports Capital is a private equity group. You know, the way that that works essentially is you get, you know, more and more now. It's investment banks and different fund partners that will compile money together, and then we'll put it together and then take over, you know, a company. There's two problems with it, right? Or there's many problems with it. First of all, I don't know if this guy has too much experience in football. I think he's got minority ownership, or MSP Partners has got minority ownership in like 4 football clubs, a team in the Bundesliga, a team in the Belgium league, a team in the Spanish in Spain, and a team in Portugal. But you know, I'd never even heard of the 4 teams, and I looked into them. I think one of them's got a 30,000 seater capacity. The others have got like 6,000 seaters and 4,000 seaters. So they're minor, sort of smaller teams that they have minority ownership in. The problem with it, as far as I can understand, right, and all I've got to go on is the Financial Times article. And as much as Sky Sports and BBC have got their networks to be able to go and figure out what the deal is, there isn't a bid that's been made yet. So you can't reject an offer that hasn't been made. Whether or not Daniel Levy and ENIC have got no intentions to sell, there's always going to be a price at which point they'll go, okay, if it's not 3.75 billion, if it's 4.75 billion, if it's 6 billion, whatever, at some point the juice is worth the squeeze for Levy and ENIC. The problem for me is the way that the deal is structured, and there's no real insight into it apart from that it's going to have something like a 20% debt to equity ratio. It looks like 3 billion of funding from the private equity side and about $700 million, give or take, that would come from debt onto the club. Where they haven't gone into any detail, and where I think that unless Sky Sports and TalkSport and all those guys know more than what was in the FT article, they haven't explained whether or not that debt would be used to replace the debt that's already on the stadium, whether it's additional debt or whether it's, you know, from a different format. Of the 70% or 80% of the bid, that if it did come in and if it was accepted, if that was through private equity, those partners will want to have some sort of return on investment. And increasingly, it's less and less likely that those people in the private equity side of the deal would want to wait 20 years before or 10 years before they sell the club on to make their return on investment. So you're going to have, if a deal like this was going to be agreed at whatever price point, you're going to probably have a situation where not only do you have to finance the debt that's been put on the club, and that will be at significantly higher interest rates than what we managed to lock in our long-term secured debt at, which I think is 2.6% on average. If that's on top of that debt, you're funding 50, 60 million quid a year in interest payments alone, right, in a future scenario. And that's if this particular price point is accepted. If these guys want to, and they've got a determination to get the deal done, and Daniel Levy and ENIC said we'll do it at 5 billion, then that additional 1.25 billion would likely come in the form of more debt, which would increase again the amount of money that gets put out of the club and the amount of money the club would have to generate to be able to service the debt. All of these things in this environment, with the interest rates the way they are, it terrifies me. You know, the way I look at private equity, I think it's a very useful tool in certain circumstances, in certain markets. I don't think that the markets are particularly ripe for that kind of investment, and we don't really know what you're getting into bed with. all we know is the guy has got these 4 minor clubs, but none of them are going to be able to really be a benchmark for us to look at and see, well, what did you do with them? Did you back the manager? Did you do those things? You also, they've got the McLaren F1 Formula 1 team. They've got X Games. They just bought, I think they've just sold their stake in, or maybe they're selling the stake in the basketball team in Phoenix. But to me, it's all a bit like, we don't know what this guy's interests are, apart from that they have interest in the property side of Tottenham Hotspur, the planning permissions that they have already secured for the new development of flats. So you could be walking into a Levy version 2, like a Levy 2.0, an ENIC 2.0. Not necessarily. You could come in and see a Todd Bowley type guy who brings the money in. Yes, there's debt associated, but then you've got the Abu Dhabi side of the deal, the 30% that come in and go, all right, let's go and spend 300-400 million quid. Let's get the players in that whoever the next manager is or Conte wants. So there's like, it's up in the air about what sort of version of a new owner you get. But to me, as I've said before, like I think the recent figures that have come out show that Tottenham Hotspur are not shy of spending money. The problems with Tottenham are our inability to spend it correctly, our inability to get rid of players that aren't working out, our inability to scout the right players, and our inability to develop youth. None of those things necessarily change just because you're moving from Daniel Levy to this other guy, you know, because they're not the ones that are going to be making those decisions. It's whoever you hire to do the job of scouting and youth development that's going to be responsible for that. So, look, I've got a bad feeling about it. In a nutshell, like there's no bid even to really kind of like reject or talk about yet. But if something happens, I would imagine now that Daniel Levy would turn this down at this particular price point. If they come back with a higher bid, who knows? But for me, the devil's in the detail, and sometimes it's better the devil you know than the devil you don't. I'm not saying that that's the case here, but for me, I don't particularly like the idea of having a lot more debt on the assets of the football club, especially in this interest rate market. So I'd rather wait. I'd rather, like, if there was someone that's going to come in and do it, I'd rather get like a sovereign wealth fund, right? Because that stuff has a lot less risk in terms of financial security or sustainability anyway. But we'll have to wait and see what happens. I don't know if that all makes sense or if I bored you guys, but like, to me, there's just no depth, there's no detail around the deal. But what it does look like is that there is probably more debt, and debt for me is an issue.
I don't know. I was watching porn anyway, so.
Brains, how are you feeling about this potential bid coming in from Jahn Najafi out of the US? Do you think that we would want him at Spurs?
It doesn't sound like, the numbers don't sound right. I can't see. I mean, I'm so levy out that I would welcome Jumanji happening and rhinos bashing down the walls and storming through the streets of but it just, yeah, it doesn't. It's like there's that other part of you that's like, you're so you're so anti-Levy that you could be looking at just the worst thing, you know.
Yeah.
And so and we know that with that stuff with the we know that we're going to attract a lot of companies that are more interested in the property portfolio and the ability to make massive turnover from events. And we're already angry at this stuff, you know, with the existing owners. So we want a, I wouldn't say like a Todd, well, actually, I'd love a Todd Bowley situation, come in and just like bring the greatest players in the world to a team. But there's also negatives on that side of it as well. So it's like, so yeah, I think it's a non-discussion until they actually come with something. But yeah, I also am a little bit dubious about who in the structure of the deal. So
I'll tell you what, Brains,
I was much more excited about QSI than these lot, I tell you that.
There's one part of it that I find really interesting, is the fact that they leaked it to the media. Like the fact that that's come through the Financial Times. They've gone through a specific an outlet, a broadcaster that doesn't deal with speculation. They don't deal with clickbait. They deal with facts and figures, and they're going after a specific audience. But the fact that it was leaked 3-4 weeks before a bid came out,
must be they're serious.
The purpose of doing that?
Surely.
Well, it's either, well, I don't. But the purpose of leaking it, you don't have to leak it to demonstrate your. I take.
I do hear you saying as well, Sean. I hear that. Actually, I think. Go on.
Sorry, just the last thing I'll say is I think it might be a ploy to take advantage of the fact that there was protests recently, and maybe by announcing it now or leaking it out through unknown sources to the FT, maybe that is trying to create a conversation before a bid comes in to see what the fans do, to see if they start to react to it and generate that kind of amplify that unrest, I guess, that exists in certain parts of the fan base. So it's a very clever, interesting tactic, and we'll see what comes from it.
One thing I don't personally have too much to add to the conversation, because the news broke in Milan, and I don't know too much about this guy, about what he'll bring to the table. But one thing I did want to ask Sean is, so I was on, Simon Jordan was on the radio before, and he said basically he heard from a club source within Tottenham that 3 billion quote wouldn't be enough to even get them through the side door. He said when it comes to this valuation, that's what he said. That's wow. What was claimed. Now I remember, it must have been a year ago or maybe 2 years ago, that when there were talks about Tottenham potentially selling, that Tottenham were looking for 3.5 billion, and everyone was saying how outrageous that was at the time. Now that seems to be well short of what Tottenham want even now. Apparently now they're looking at about 4.5 billion. What do you reckon of that potential price increase over the net after the last couple of years, or of that price overall? Do you think that's like a fair price? Are we asking too much?
Well, it depends what it comes with, right? So if it's just the stadium and the squad and all the assets that are just typically Tottenham Hotspur Football Club related in the training ground, then you can make the comparison to like other clubs that are, being spoken about, being talked about selling right now. The Chelsea deal looked to be around the 3 to 4 billion, depending on who you ask. Manchester United, I think within the next week or two, anyone that's interested in making a bid for them has to put in a confirmed statement of interest, and then we'll see, because that is a stock exchange listed company. You'll have to see all of the details of those bids, and if there's 10 companies or 20 or 50 or whatever, only one of them will be successful. We'll see what happens with the prices of all that stuff. And so you'll get to have like a range of valuations. Manchester United have got a massive brand, a far bigger brand than Tottenham, but their stadium's falling apart. Chelsea have got a brand that's equitable to Tottenham, according to Deloitte, but their stadium is about to be rebuilt, but it's going to cost apparently 50% or 100% higher than what Tottenham's cost, because of the commodities boom. And in inflationary markets, things like metals, things like concrete, all that stuff has gone through the roof. What I would say is that if Tottenham Hotspur's valuation is not insignificantly based around the value of the planning permissions for those properties in Tottenham, let's call a spade a spade. Tottenham is being gentrified right now, and it's a very lucrative area in terms of its proximity to central London and all that stuff. And so, in a market, in a recession, in inflationary markets, there's something called nothing safe as houses. I'm sure you've heard the phrase. People, even though you might see a general reduction in house prices for the time being, because mortgage payments on the individual might outweigh the ability, mortgage payment increases might outweigh the ability for people who lose their jobs in a recession. But for the developers, for the people that have got no issues there, this is the perfect time to be able to make an absolute killing in gentrification regions. And so what I think where Tottenham's valuation is probably on the top end of that range is because of the things like the planning permissions that they have for the second phase of the Northumberland redevelopment plan. And that's not something that Manchester United has to offer. That's not something that Liverpool has to offer. And it's not something that Chelsea has to offer. So whoever we get in, if we do get someone in, like they're probably going to be interested in property as well. And so those things, when people get frustrated about hearing, cinemas and hotels and golf courses.
We're a football club, Sean.
Oh, I know that. And none of those things, none of the profits or costs of those things are ever represented on any of the Tottenham Hotspur accounts. So I don't know why people moan about it so much. But any new owner, I would imagine, is probably going to want to have that stuff as well. So you're going to have the same sort of frustrations. If you think that those things are an issue now, they're probably going to be gripes that you're going to be annoyed about with a future owner. The only difference is whether or not the new owner comes in and keeps you happy with the amount of money they're willing to spend and improves the ability to identify, retain, and develop talent. And if they don't work out, sell them better. And I don't think any of those things naturally change whether you've got Daniel Levy or this Iranian-American guy in charge. I think that those things are shaped by people like Paratici and his team rather than Daniel Levy. So, you know, I don't know what else to say about it. I don't necessarily think anything changes in regards to Tottenham's fortunes just because we changed the ownership.
All right, guys. I think unless you got any closing words, Brains.
Other than just trying to make a joke out of the guy's name again, nah.
Big up. I think we'll leave it there, guys. Really good conversation there about all those topics. I want to know from you guys in the comment section below all your views surrounding everything that we've discussed today. But Sean and Brains, thank you so much for coming on today. Brains, do you want to tell people where they can find you outside of We Are Tottenham?
Just go and check out all the music, Brains McLeod on pretty much everything, Spotify, or Syllable and Brains on Spotify, or, you know, wherever else. Check me out on YouTube as well. Loads of freestyles, loads of bars if you're a bar guy. Yeah.
ChatGPT raps, yeah.
I battled that thing. I absolutely enjoyed that thing. That thing can't do multisyllabics, goddammit. Yeah, no, other than that, you know, that's it. You know, it's been good to chat, and yeah, I'm gonna go and get butlered after my football game tonight.
Awesome.